and welcome to.
Oh.
Jody, you're muted.
How did I get muted? I muted myself, I guess. So welcome. And today's masterclass I'm very excited, is about personality styles. And we have with us Robert Perriello, who is our top agent for Century 21 All Points in all offices. Robert, you have been a double centurion as far back as I can find you is 2017. You were probably that before then, though. When did you start with us?
I don't know. I started with you guys.
In 17 or before that? No, you were before. So I'm sure it was before that.
No, it's been 7 years, I think. With
7 years. Okay. So you're our top producer. I think you have been either our top or close to the top since your first year with us.
So no, probably not that early, but for the past 4 or so, it's probably more accurate.
Very excited to have you doing this session with us today. And I love the subject that you picked, personality styles.
Yeah.
And, you know, your background, you started in real estate in 2009 and you were a teacher. So you did it very, very just for yourself, right? And your friends and family. And then tell me what happened when you came with us. What was the circumstances?
Yeah, I had my license. I was teaching probably about 5 years or so. Had maybe done, I don't know, 2 or 3 buyer deals in that time. So not even one a year, just here or there type thing. Had always wanted to do it, but I was teaching. I didn't really have the time. Or more importantly, I didn't know what to do. So I got to a point where I had a 2-year-old daughter. My wife was pregnant with our second daughter. She was doing maybe 2 or 3 months. And I just got to the point where I was like, I figured it was either now or never. I had to make the jump now or never, right? So I went into Kelly and Ryan's office, the broker's office, and I just said, listen, I want to quit teaching. Tell me what to do. I'll do whatever you guys recommend. I'm ready to do this. And they're like, well, you can't just quit. You need a plan, right? So let's talk about this. And they started introducing me to Mike Ferry and coaching me and helping me. And it kind of took off from there.
That is really fantastic. So we're going to talk about the 4 personality styles. And you got this from Mike Ferry. So yes. They are the analytical, the driver, the expressive, the amiable. And what book is this from that you?
What book you said?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So first, I think whenever we're talking personality styles, there's a lot of different names for these same personality styles, depending on who you're listening to or what you're reading. Tony Robbins talks about personality styles a lot, and he uses the DISC profile, the D-I-S and C. There's some other good books I read that call it a red, yellow, green, or blue. But I think for our purposes, Mike Ferry calls them, like you said, Jody, amiable, driver, analytical, and expressive. And I think for our purposes, since I was taught a lot by the Mike Ferry system, and this book, Versatile Selling, was one of the books that I read early by, I think it's Larry Wilson. This refers to the personality styles and by those names. But no matter what you're going by, they all mean the same thing. It's just they have different names for the category. If that,
right.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And we have talked about this before. I am very impressed with this. Larry Wilson has written a lot of really good books, and he's very well known. And I think he was the first one to do the personality styles. So tell me what personality style you are.
So I am analytical, but like a lot of people under stress, we can be a different personality style, and I'm more of a driver under stress.
Great. And so tell me a little bit before we get into more about you, the personality styles. Can we just get a little bit of an overview? So what is an analytical?
Sure. So analyticals, there's a bunch of factors, but some of the main things that I think are important in maybe a sales situation or getting to know someone. Analyticals are very low on emotion. They take a very long time to make decisions, and true to their name, they want to look at all the numbers. They want to kind of see every scenario in their head before they make a decision, right? And this can be frustrating. As an analytical, one of the most frustrating people to work with is also an analytical, because they can take so much time to make a decision, and we want to present the facts to them and keep them moving. And this can become a challenge for us, but that's an analytical.
Okay.
Am I missing anything? What do you think, Jody? Am I missing anything on the
Yeah,
analytical?
no, I'm married to an analytical, so I totally get it. And I love the fact that you're a driver under stress. So that's when you really push forward and you make those quick decisions when you have to.
Yeah. In business, I think it's important to, one of the cool things about personality types is having the awareness of what you are. We all have like our inherent strengths and weaknesses based on our personality types. And when you have an awareness of what your weaknesses are, you can work on that, right? Without that awareness, you don't have a chance. So in business, having a level of driver or quick decision making, is important. If you don't make any decisions, you can't solve problems, you can't progress. So for me, when there's a lot of things to do, I just have to start chipping away and doing them, and I can turn into a driver at that point.
Tell me more about driver. What is their personality?
So they're also low on emotion. They are going to make quick decisions. So the opposite of analytical. They have in common the low emotional piece, but they're going to make very fast decisions. They want to see some numbers, some type of plan, but if it makes sense, they're going to go with their gut. They're not going to dilly-dally. So in a sales situation, we like that, right? Because we can show them the facts and they're going to make a logical decision.
Now, if you were the difference between an analytical and a driver, how would you approach an analytical to get them to make a decision?
Yeah, so the analytical, I'd be careful not to push them. A lot of times if we push too hard, you're going to push them away. They're going to shut right down, which is contradictory to a lot of what we're taught, especially in, say, Mike Ferry, you want to ask questions, you want to help move people along and force a decision. But if you do that to an analytical, you're going to lose them. So you have to be patient. You have to really understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then just give them as much data, facts, figures, scenarios, spell it all out for them. Ask them if you can give them anything. What other information can I give you to help you make this decision, right? You really got to make sure you're giving it all to them.
That makes a lot of sense. So you give them all the statistics you can think of: price per square footage, days on the market, list to sale price ratio, assessed value to close price ratio. All those kind of things can help them.
All of it. Your track record, the agent, the brokerage track record, your track record in that town, or the brokerage track record in that town. You gotta every data point that could matters, and find a way to work it in.
And then with the driver, what would you give them?
So opposite, you can't spend too much time. You have to get the most important information, based on what their goal is. What is the most important thing they're trying to do? Give them that information so they can make the decision quickly. If it's dragging out or you're not getting back to them fast enough, they're liable to just jump ship and go with someone else. They want to make the decision fast. It's frustrating when it takes a while for them.
So we have the driver. Now we also, and the analytical, and we also have expressive and amiable. So tell me about those two.
Yeah, so expressive will be Similar to a driver in the fact that they'll make a faster decision, right? But it'll be more on emotion. They'll go with the amiable and the expressive are more emotional. They're going to be higher emotion. There's going to be some ups and downs, right? When the deal falls through, they're really going to feel that, right? And when they see the home they love, they're really going to get excited about that. So with an expressive, the details are important too, but it wouldn't be as much of the numbers and the statistics. It's going to be more about the details of the home. You know, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, it's really important to me that I get every detail of this home across to that next buyer. And in our marketing, you know, what are some important things that you love about this home that you want to make sure, you know, we're going to put in the write-up, right? And they're just going to go, you know, they're going to talk about every little, you know, the color of the grout, the tile, the faucets they pick. They're really going to take off with all the little and you have to listen and hear that. And they want to make sure you're getting that message across. So really listen to the expressive and the details. The cool thing about a driver and expressive, those are going to be the ones that we're going to see some 1-minute listening presentations and get them signed. Because if you can present that information in a concise way that they're looking for, they're not going to ask a lot of questions. If it feels right for the expressive, if it looks right logically to the driver, they're just going to sign and they're going to trust you to get the job done.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Now, what, you know, I love that. What about the amiable?
The amiable. So you're the amiable, right, Jody?
Right.
So the amiable, it's a lot. They're also a little higher on emotion. They can be slower decision makers too. And so you do have to be careful not to push an amiable sometimes, because you get that same result. Where have you ever done lead follow-up and you feel like you really had a good rapport with somebody, and then all of a sudden they don't call you back, right? It's because they're amiable, they're analytical. They don't like confrontation, right? They're not necessarily going to tell you that they didn't pick you. They don't want to disappoint you, right? They're very concerned with how everyone else is feeling, right? How the move's going to affect the family, right? What the neighbors are going to think when they move, right? These are things that the amiable is very aware of and drives their decision making. So for me, I'm always really, who do they care about? Who's important in their life? And then how can we help, you know, them understand that we're going to take care of those people along with us through this process.
I love that. And that makes sense to me. So if you talk about everyone's feelings that's involved in this situation and making that the paramount thing, you're going to get the amiable to sign.
Because it's usually not even about them. It's like, who is it? What person are they trying to please, right? That's who it's about more than themselves with the amiable.
Okay, so, you know, when you decided to get into real estate, you were a teacher and you decided, okay, I want to get into real estate. Your wife was pregnant, like you said. You were in a situation where you were under stress. So that brought the driver out of you and made you, how did you become so successful? Because I honestly have never met anyone that became as successful as you are, as fast as you did. I remember hearing about you. I wasn't back with the company yet. I was a corporate. And I remember, you know, people telling me about this Robert Perriello, and you know, I can't call for sale by owners and expires because Robert Perriello has a rap on it. I'm like, what happened? So tell me what happened. How did you just rocket ship to being the top agent?
So I think the biggest thing that helped me, I was kind of lucky because I didn't have any bad habits, right? Like when I came into the business, I didn't have like an ego where, well, I already know how to do this, or I didn't know anything. And I was looking for some guidance and, you know, something that made sense. And I was gonna go for it. And, you know, Ryan and Kelly, they helped me with a plan that was pretty clear and made sense. So I took that blind faith, if you will, and I kind of took the jump in and just did what they said. I did whatever they said, and it worked, right? The Mike Ferry coaching works. So it's very logical. It's simple work. There's nothing secretive about it, but it's hard to actually do it every day. So one of the things I said to myself was, so I used to play sports in high school, right? And one of the things I said to myself was, in high school, like I thought I knew all the answers, right? I thought my way was the best way. And where did that get me? It didn't, I was decent in high school, but never made it past there because my ego, right? So one of the things I said was to myself, if there's one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be coachable. I'm going to listen to people who are doing what I wanted to do. And I was going to take that advice and actually use it. And luckily for me, and still at the time, I mean, there are agents that, blow what I do out of the water, and that's inspiring, and it's something we all can learn from. So there's always somebody in this business that's doing it better, bigger and better, and we can learn from them. So that approach, I think, helped me in the beginning.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So whatever they told you to do, the Mike Ferry, so you practice your scripts, you made the calls, you stuck to your schedule. You always have a smile on your face whenever I've talked to you. That's why it was hard for me to believe you were analytical, because you seem more like you really care about people. So how did that all
Which
happen?
I do, but
Well, and you do, but you had to practice, right?
Yeah.
That versatility to learn, like you said, you had to know yourself and then work on things.
Yeah, so that self-awareness is important, because I think I was telling you this before, Jody. I'm very introverted by nature, so it's much easier for me to to not go knock on doors, or to not go to a Mike Ferry event or a big group setting, or to not meet with the seller. Like, to do that requires a lot of energy for me. So some advice that I took early on to help me with that. I think Mike Ferry actually said this. He said, in life, we're always going to have two paths, right? We're going to have the path of least resistance, right? And then the path of resistance, the challenging path, right? And if you want a result that's worthwhile, it's never at that path of least resistance, right? With anything in life, with your family, with your relationships, with your business, with your health, right? If you take that path of resistance, there's always a better reward at the end. So whenever I don't want to do something, whenever, you got to call the client that's going to talk for a half hour and not, just battle you on everything and not really take your advice. We all have those clients. Those are tough calls to make. Or we have, we're not feeling well a day and we have to make our calls to our database or our prospecting, right? I would always ask myself, all right, am I taking that path of least resistance right now? Or am I making the harder choice? And like, whenever I have a moment of, not wanting to do something, I try to ask myself that question. And that kind of helps me say, all right, if I want that worthwhile result, I have to do this task, whatever it is,
It sounds like the school of hard knocks to me. So have you seen what happens if you don't push yourself? Have you had that experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all do, right? I think the danger, or not the danger, but the reality is when we feel like we're doing it's that awareness, right? We feel like we're doing the right things, but we're not doing them with intensity. We're not doing them with focus. We're not doing them to the best of our ability. We're almost like just going through the motion. So that's a dangerous place. And that's a place I can get in sometimes. Like, my discipline's good. I'm always going to show up, but sometimes I could just go through the motions, right? And when you're doing that, all of a sudden you see slowly your results start to dip. And it's not something that just happens right away. It's not this green light. It's something that you always have to monitor, to make sure you're keeping it in check.
So you have made some big changes in your career, as from going from just starting, sticking to your schedule, getting a coach, to now you have a team. Are those self-directed changes, or did that come from coaching?
Oh, good question. Probably a combination, right? What I think is great about coaching or having a mentor of any kind is when you're thinking of a change, being able to bounce that idea off somebody that's done it is a great way to help break it down and see if this is a change worthwhile or if we're just spinning our wheels here, right? So I think having that coach, that mentor, Ryan and Kelly, there to, bounce ideas off of really helps. And also vice versa, they've all given me great ideas too when I make changes as well. So it's a combination.
Yeah, that's great. And
Yeah.
how long does it take you to size someone up when you first meet them?
I am not perfect at it by any means. This is something that it's for all of us to continually work on and get better at. Like anything in life, when you think you got something and you stop trying to learn about it, you lose it, right? I'm a big believer in we're either growing or we're declining. There's no cruise control. So, it depends on the person. Some people are just, one personality type, 100%. There's no guessing. They're either a straight driver or straight, but some are more versatile and some are aware of their weaknesses or some are under stress. A lot of times when we're meeting with someone, it's a sales situation. It's comfortable for us. We do it all the time. But for them, they're selling their house or they're very nervous. They don't know what to expect. They're meeting this stranger who's a salesperson, and there's a good chance they're going to be acting under their second personality type and not their main one. So, for some people, it takes time. You got to ask questions. You got to listen. I mean, I can't stress the listening enough. When we get in there and start talking, we can't learn what their personality type is. They're not going to show it to us that way. We have to ask them questions. We have to see what they're trying to do. And that's how we, learn it and can adapt to it. Sometimes we're going to think we know it and we're going to be wrong. And we got to realize that and make a change.
That is so interesting because people are under stress when we come out to see them. They're worried about what we think about their house, and how much money are they going to get? Are you going to tell them it's a lot less, or are they going to be happily surprised? So it must be hard if they have the driver personality, but they're really empathetic. Well, I keep calling it the wrong one, but the amiable. So that, that's a really good point. And then it seems like it comes naturally to you. Do you think because you were a teacher that helped you? Like, how did being a teacher help you with your business?
Okay, so first, it's definitely not natural. That's what I think the coolest thing about, like, when I tell you talking to other social settings are uncomfortable for me, right? So, that's what makes this system so great. In the beginning, if you are more shy, introverted, or unsure of yourself, just don't have the knowledge, it gives you the questions, right? The question, you don't just ask questions and magically have a sale happen. The questions bring out the person's problem, like what they're actually trying to accomplish. And if we're listening, we can actually hear the problem and we'll have an opportunity to solve it. If we can't solve the problem, we're not going to make a sale. We're not going to make a commission. Our business isn't going to grow. The only reason someone will pay us our money is if we can actually solve their problem. So using the questions to hear what the problem is and try to solve it is really the key.
So you're talking about the scripts, right?
Correct. Talking about the scripts. So it definitely wasn't easy for me in the beginning, that's for sure. I will say, I think there is a lot of correlation to being a teacher and a real estate agent, because at the end of the day, you're trying to educate. You're trying to use questions to get a message across. When you're teaching, you're using questions to get the students to learn about whatever the topic is. Here, we're using questions to get buyers and sellers to learn about the real estate market and if selling or buying is actually helpful to them.
That's interesting. I know when we first talked, you were saying that, you do have to size up the classroom and manage them, or you have kids, jumping on the desks. And sometimes buyers and sellers could be the same way. Tell me more about that.
So that's another big piece to it. if you just have one client, you could run around and just, basically do whatever the client says, but I don't know if that's productive for you or the client, right? As you grow your business and you're helping more people, now you have to manage multiple clients at the same time. So yeah, yes, Jody, that is very similar to teaching from a classroom management perspective where, you have to be proactive and tell students your expectations. And a lot of you might have kids on this call too. And if you have kids and you just tell your kids to do something, does that always work? No, you tell them and then they're jumping on the table. So you have to tell them and then you actually have to use your actions to reinforce your expectations, right? To create that classroom management. And it's the same thing with your clients. You have to be upfront and share your expectations with them, share the process, but then you actually have to use your actions to implement those standards. Because if you're telling them one thing, if you're telling them you return calls between 4 and 5 p.m., and you respond to them immediately every time they call you, they're not going to respect your schedule, right? Your actions have to be in line with what you're telling them and what you're supporting. And that was a big help to me as I grew my business and I had to manage more things at once. Having that structure from being a teacher definitely helped for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like the idea that, you've memorized the scripts. So you really can list the questions, help you see what their personality is.
Correct. They bring it out. Like I think I was telling you on, and I don't know who uses what scripts on this call, but if we just take a Mike Ferry script and we look at the pre-qualifying script and we ask, will you describe your home for me? Like sometimes people skip that question because they're like, oh, I see the pictures. I don't need to. It's not about, yes, it's about learning about their home, but it's also a personality style question. However they answer that question gives you some big clues on what their personality style is, right? If they're like, well, it's a colonial with 3 bedrooms. Okay, driver, right? If they're like, oh my gosh, my pink color, we have the bright yellow in the kitchen and we got this faucet on the island. Oh my God, the faucet was imported from Italy, right? They're an expressive. They want to talk to you about all the little details. And if, well, it was a nice family home. We lived here for 30 years, right? It's your amiable. So listen to how they answer that question. And that's a big one to give you some insight on what personality type they are. And I can't stress enough, this is a really important piece. Many people think, how many times have you had a seller say, well, if I was looking at a home, I wouldn't do it that way. Or last time I sold my home, I didn't do it that way. That's true. That's one personality. That's 1/4 of the population will do things the way you do. And if you're only marketing that way and you're only looking for, you're missing 75% of the population, right? So a lot of time having that conversation with the seller is important in terms of marketing, right? But also for us in terms of, how we can relate to them and how we can get our message across to them so they can see things the way they see it and not just the way we do. If that makes sense.
So you're managing your customers and you're helping them with their versatility too. Because it's true. A lot of times they think we're idiots and they think, why are you doing that? And it's because of the different personality styles. So you have to manage that too.
Correct.
Okay. So you have really worked on your versatility, which is one of the reasons you chose to talk about this. What are some of the things you touched on it a little bit? But what are some of the things that you do to become more versatile?
Yeah, I think the big one is if something is uncomfortable, I try not to shy away from it because it's easy or because it's the path of least resistance. In fact, the opposite, like, when you get that little feeling in your stomach, like you're like, oh, that's probably good for me, but it makes you feel it like, it feels a little uncomfortable. That's probably a sign that you should go do it. Like do the opposite of what you feel. And when you do more of that, you start to get comfortable in these situations that you weren't originally comfortable in. And it's also going to expose you to people and places and things that you normally wouldn't be exposed to. And all that might not seem like it matters at the time, but when you're constantly putting yourself in new situations or reading books on topics that you might not want, trying new things, that it goes a long way in improving your comfort levels with different personality types, or at least have a better understanding for them so you can have a little more patience when dealing with them.
So it helps you understand your clients by doing things that make you uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think of it this way, like, drivers make quick decisions, right?
Right.
You could take, say, an Analytical or an Expressive, and they can really get to talking and get involved in what they're saying. And so if a driver's not versatile, they may jump ship and grow impatient and not want to work with someone because they don't truly understand their personality. If they understand they're expressive and they're just being themselves, then you're going to dig in and listen and try to solve the problem, right? You're going to be a little more patient if you're at least aware of where the person's coming from.
Right. And one thing that I know about you is you have all these systems set up in your business. So you pretty much are doing the same thing every day, but you're getting more appointments and you're getting more people to sign the documents because you have learned versatility. So you're able to relate to people. When did you start seeing that happen?
Like understanding personality styles, you mean? Or
Yeah, because a lot, you could make 5 calls, get an appointment, get them to sign the listing, and maybe another person doing the exact same thing, using the same scripts,
yeah,
makes 35 calls and gets an appointment and gets a listing. So developing that versatility has really helped you.
yes. And I will say in the beginning, I wasn't even aware of it. I didn't even know personality styles existed. I would say probably my first couple of years. At some point in year 1 or 2, I was in, but I wasn't introduced to it right away. Just at one of the trainings or events is when I first started learning about it. But what I will say that did help me is another point to going back to being a teacher. I grew up in Waterbury. I taught in an inner city school. So there was a lot of behavior management there. There was a lot of conflict resolution there with the students. So honestly, our adults, our sellers are the same exact way. You solve the problem for adults the same way you do for the kids, right? It's a lot of showing them you understand by showing them you can empathize with them, and then actually listening, show them you're listening, and then provide a solution. So it's the same thing. I had some experience in that I took and I used on adults who I saw were in crisis mode in their own right, whether they were mad at their last agent for not selling their house or mad at real estate agents for calling them when they were trying to sell their home on their own. Why would they want real estate agents to call them? I don't know why, but so it really transitioned. That helped me for sure.
Okay, so let's say you're going into the house and that they have an objection, and it is, you know what, Robert, I love everything you're saying. Will you cut the commission? How would you handle that with a driver?
No, do you have any more questions?
How about an Amiable?
I appreciate you asking, Jody. Can I tell you my concern with that?
Oh, that's good.
And then I would go into, if an agent is willing to cut their own commission just like that, what do you think they're going to do to the price of your home in a negotiating situation?
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
What about Analytical?
It would be the same, because the numbers would still.
Okay.
That would still. Yeah, and the Expressive, I'd probably say no. Any other questions?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you were just starting out, you're an agent listening to this, you're just starting out, where would you say to start with to get to know the different personality styles so it will help you with your business?
Yeah, so read about them for sure. The Versatile Selling book's a good one. This was one I read, I think within the past year or two. It's called Surrounded by Idiots, and they do the red, yellow, green, blue. But this is a great resource too. Tony Robbins has some good stuff on it. YouTube videos. Like whenever you're trying to learn, whenever I'm trying to learn anything new, I want to read, I want to watch YouTube, I want to dive into everything I can, and I want to get a lot of people's opinions, not just one, and see what I can apply. Here's the other thing. Don't be afraid to apply, which I think a lot of agents, like, they get these really great ideas, but then they're afraid to actually use them because they might not work, or they might push a client away, or like, don't be afraid to go in there and mess it up and say it and have it not work and maybe lose a client. Like, yes, you might lose a client. Maybe it didn't work well with them, whatever strategy you were using or way you were trying to relate, but you're going to learn from that experience. And I would argue whatever you learn there is going to be more, you're going to be able to help more people than the one person you lost. And you're not trying to lose them on purpose. You're trying your best. Like, use the things you learn, actually use them. That's a big piece. One of the
So
most
stick to your schedule. So tell me what your schedule is every day.
Yeah, so I wake up at 5 a.m., meditate, journal, read, plan out my goals for the day. Then I get to the office right around 7:30ish, give or take, and then jump right into my prospecting in the morning. Then I do my listing appointments early afternoon, 12:30 and 2. Finish up, I do a little admin right before the listing appointments and right after, return any calls I need to, any negotiations I need to. And then by 4 o'clock, I really want to be at CrossFit and doing my daily workout, because I believe that health piece is super important to give us the longevity, to do this. Our health, our energy is really important in this business. So, I'm very conscious of not burning out and making sure I have enough energy to, keep at this.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you take time off with your family.
Of course. Yeah.
Which I love. It's so nice. I'm sure people have questions for you. I think this is a hard subject because there's a learning curve.
Sure.
And
I definitely don't have it mastered. That's for sure.
I don't see how anybody could have that mastered. But I learned so much from you. Just for example, if somebody's talking slowly, they're probably analytical. But when you first meet them under pressure, they might be a driver, but then they don't make that decision quickly. So now you have to rethink it, or they might be amiable. So now you have to talk about their family, so I'm sure you guys have questions. Does anybody want to unmute yourself and ask Robert anything about this or anything? Top agent in our company.
I
And
have a question, Robert. When you were talking about the driver who can't believe that people looking at their house are going to care about this or that, when you try to explain to him that he's missing a great portion of the market, do you actually go into a discussion about personality types, or do you just do it more vaguely?
Yeah, so good question. So I always try not to explain when I'm trying to help a seller. I want to try to ask them questions to understand it, right? So many times I will get into the personality types, and I would say something like, yes, I know, Mr. Seller, that's the way you look at things. However, there are 4 personality types out there, and if we're only doing things your way, we're only hitting 25% of the population. Are you open to at least learning how the other 75% of the population, looks at homes, from my experience, right? And many times, if they're open to that, right? And you can begin to explain to why it's a benefit to whatever you're trying to help them with, if you get them to be responsive.
Great,
I'm so
thanks.
glad you asked that, Carrie, because I was thinking the same thing. When you said that you say that to the seller, I would thought, I don't know if I could say that to a seller. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Robert, I have a question. It's Patty Ryan. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us and doing this today, number one.
Sure.
So what is your best, I want to say tip maybe, on handling say you have a husband who's a driver and a wife who's an amiable, and they're arguing amongst themselves. How do you step in or step away from that?
I think it's just that, right? You just step away and let them go through, and you know, it happens, right? Husbands and wives don't always see eye to eye, and you know, sometimes they're the same personality type and they don't see eye to eye, and you got to let them work through what they're working through, and then try to ask a question to get them back on. You know, a lot of times it's like they're getting off track. You know, what they're arguing about is usually separate from the decision that needs to be made, right? So again, show them you hear, okay, you know, husband, I understand you're frustrated with this, and then you say to the wife, I understand you're frustrated because of this. So show them you're hearing them, and then, you know, get them back on track with a question, right? Do we still want to be in a house before the spring, or do you still want to have this property sold, you know, before February, or is there now a plan B, right? Like, try to get them back on what the goal is, and a lot of times that'll get them off the argument and back on to what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Ryan. I have a question. So what would you say? I actually have two. The first one is, what would you say if you called a for sale by owner that said in their little description on Zillow, 2.5% commission to buyer's agent only, like do not call to list? What would you say to them? And then also, how do you kind of classify from most important to least important when you're calling expireds or for sale by owners? Do you look at them and think, you know, which ones are going to be the most likely to succeed and which ones look like they would be a waste, kind of?
Good question. So sorry, who is this? I can't see who is asking me the question. Am I?
This is Christina Dukas from the Manchester
okay.
office.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Good question. So that's a very analytical question. And so because I'm analytical, something that I've done intentionally is, you know, analyticals, we want to know all the answers before we dive in. So we want to read the description, we want to read all about the seller before we actually call them. The reality is the seller might not even pick up the phone, and we've just wasted 15 minutes learning all this information. So I actually don't look at any of that stuff by design, because I don't want to get stuck in my own thoughts, right? If I start looking at that, I'll never make the call. So I'm just calling, and when they pick up and I ask my questions, and you know, I try to get the conversation going. And if it's not going to go, it's not going to go. And I'm trying to find someone that needs that help, that is willing to have that conversation. So I don't get into the descriptions or anything before a call. I'm just going to
Nice.
get right in. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Robert, I have a question. Erin Mancino here.
Hi, Erin.
First of all, you are a rock star, and I think everything that you're sharing with us today is really important stuff to listen to. One thing I've always known about you, because I remember sitting with you in the Southington office when you were just weeks into this business, and you were so focused and motivated to begin with. And I just give you so much credit for continuing that and your fantastic successes. One thing I noticed when you're talking today, and I find myself nodding my head, yes, you use the word right a lot. Like you'll make a statement and finish the statement with the word right. Is that something that you just do naturally to get agreement with the person you're talking with, or is that something that you've practiced?
Good question. So I did not know I did that, but you're not the first person that's told me that. So maybe I should be more aware of that. No, so I just do that. Maybe I'm convincing myself of my point. I don't know, but it's not something I practice. No.
Well, it certainly makes the listener agree with what you're saying. I found myself nodding through this entire 40 minutes or 45 minutes that you've been speaking. As you say the word right after you state something, I'm automatically in agreement. So you may not know it, but that was a great learning experience today for me, just that one word.
Awesome.
So
Well, I'm
thank
glad
you,
that
and
helped.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.
So we
Hey,
have a
Robert.
question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
It's Jason.
Hey, Jason.
How are you?
Good.
You
How
ready?
are you?
Ready to be on the hot seat?
Yes, I'm on the hot seat.
What's the most listed you took in a month?
I think it was 16.
You take less than 6%?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Do you have a price you won't go below?
Yes. You gotta have minimum standards, and it doesn't matter what other people's minimum standards are. You gotta have your own, and you gotta know that going in. In terms of the service you're gonna provide, in terms of the people you're gonna work with, in terms of, and when I say that, I mean people that are, if they don't respect the way you do your business and your systems, and they want to change all that, that's a minimum standard. Is if they're gonna work, if I'm gonna work with someone, they gotta be comfortable with my systems and my process, or else that's not a good fit, right? So it's not just commission, it's not just list price, it's systems as well as process.
Mm-hmm. Do you still door knock?
Not as much as I should, but I do.
Okay. Do you still use a Segway?
A what?
Segway?
Oh, it's not a Segway there. I think those are illegal. I looked at those first. I think those are illegal. I got a scooter, an electric scooter.
You got all right. And your first year your first year you started, how many listings did you have, and then your second and your third?
How many
That's it.
listings?
How many transactions you take your first year, second and third?
Yeah, so I started in like June or July. And I think that first 6 months, like to finish out that year, I did like 12 or 15, something like that. And then the first calendar year I did 47, like for a whole year.
Got it. And my last question is, how many people do you have in your sphere?
You broke up a little. I think you said, how many people do I have in my sphere?
Yeah, he broke up. I think that's what he meant.
So right around 800. That's, I'm working really hard to get that to 1,000.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You have a good holiday, Robert.
You too, man.
Robert, I love that your systems and your processes, you talked about with me before, that you have set them up and you've gotten pushback even from other agents and things like that. And one thing I love that you mentioned was it's the best thing for the clients.
Yeah.
So it as much as it may sound like you're doing things for you, you're really doing them for the client, that you're doing the best thing for the clients.
Yeah, and don't let one person who maybe doesn't see that. It's that whole rule where 20% of the people take up your most time. Don't let the one person who doesn't respect the way you do business, change your business. It's one person, right? 99% of the people, I think, really see value in the systems that I use and the customers, because the reality is I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can create a better customer experience, because that a lot of times is the differentiating factor. So don't let one person who doesn't appreciate that derail like all the good you've done and all the good people who do appreciate what you do. A lot of times I found the biggest people who get upset with maybe some of my systems is, other agents, and not necessarily clients. Clients really value what we do for them, but sometimes other agents want things done their way, right? And that's a lack of versatility. They see it through their lens, and they're just worried about what their own agenda is instead of looking at the big picture. So we can't let that derail us. It happens a lot in this industry.
That makes sense. One of the questions in the chat was, do you only use Mike Ferry scripts, or do you have other ones that you use as well?
No, so I only use the main Mike Ferry scripts. I will I do spend not as much as I should. In the beginning, when I first started, I spent a lot of time thinking of the common problems that people would throw at me in whatever market we were in. And I would think of, questions that could guide them to see how we can help. So I would spend a lot of time thinking of my own questions, but that would be separate from, I always start with the Mike Ferry script. That information, that gives you the necessary information to get going from there.
Okay, and then another question was, disciplined habits. What tools do you use to develop those habits and those routines?
I think if I had the answer to that, I don't think I'd even be on this call. I'd be doing a bigger call somewhere. I mean, isn't that the magic pill we all want to know, right? Like everybody knows what to do, right? If you want to live longer, you eat vegetables and clean fish and chicken, but actually doing it, right, is the hard thing. So I guess for me, in the beginning, I didn't have another option. I had a 2-year-old and I had a newborn on the way. And I told my wife that I'm giving up my steady, secure career as a teacher to do this. So there was absolutely no other option. And now I guess that's, I know people talk about this why, you have to have a strong why, and all right, but you need something. There's got to be something that gets you up in the morning, that gets you excited. So you got to find something that gets you excited. And that's when you have that, everything else in terms of discipline falls in place. If you know why you're doing what you're doing, then the discipline kind of lines up.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What other questions you guys have?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Robert. This is Katie. So my question is, since you started the real estate business, what, if any, you could have changed or you could have done different?
That's a really good question. Really good question. So I tell this to people a lot. If I could do one thing different, I would start with my database. I ignored my database probably the first couple of years because I felt uncomfortable calling my friends and people I know and talking to them about real estate. I didn't care if I called a stranger and they hung up on me or yelled at me. That didn't hurt my feelings, but I cared when, and it didn't even happen, but I cared what they might think, right? And that's me thinking too much, but so once I got over that and realized it's part of my job, that was a big turning point. So I would say if you're starting, don't ignore that. Don't go on the path of least resistance. Take that tougher path, make those calls, call them quarterly. You don't even have to talk about real estate. As long as they know you're in the business, just call them, show them you care, ask them questions. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, how's the real estate market? Because they know you're in real estate. And then you can answer with some type of market update and ask them if they know anyone you can help, right? So don't ignore that piece.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think almost every agent that I've met with has a hard time with calling the people that they know first. That is hard.
We want to do 100 transactions without talking to people we know. It's very backwards.
Lucas,
We don't want to work with people we know. We only want to work with strangers.
Yeah. So your phone, the people in your phone, call them. Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to ask? This was so good. And
Cool. Well,
I
thank
really
you for having
appreciate
me.
your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate, like in the beginning, I watched so many agents and tried to learn from them, like videos like this or interviews on YouTube. It really helped me so much. There's always something you can learn from someone else. I still do it to this day. So I hope that I provided some value too in that way.
Oh,
Who are you looking up to?
Oh my gosh. Oh man, so many. There's some just great agents out there. Bernie Gallerini down in Nashville. There's an agent named Brianne out in Oklahoma. There's an agent named John Sy in Canada. These are all people that do like 500, 600, 700 transactions a year. And, you know, I want to learn. I want to see how they're doing it, how they're getting better customer service, better systems. You know, so many. There's Greg Sisson down in South Carolina, Valerie Caro out in Arizona. I mean, there's a list. It's crazy. There's a list of probably 50 to 100 agents that sell 500 homes a year. You know what I mean? The list could really go on and on. And when you think about that, right, it's amazing when we get stuck on whatever number we're at. I think that takes us like out of our fishbowl and makes us realize, you know, whatever I'm doing is in my own head. There's a way to do this if I keep learning, you know.
Great question. I love it.
Yeah.
So motivational. Everyone is chiming in. This was really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Have a happy holiday, everybody.
Thank you,
Happy
Robert.
holidays,
Thank you,
everyone.
Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
All right.
so much.
Bye, guys. Happy holidays.
You
All right,
too.
see you
Thanks,
later.
Robert.